Most people are not living anymore. They are reacting. Reacting to notifications, reacting to stress, reacting to algorithms, reacting to pressure, reacting to a world that never stops demanding their attention. And slowly, without realizing it, they are losing themselves. Not dramatically, quietly. The dangerous part is, most people don't even notice it happening, because modern destruction no longer looks violent. It looks normal. It looks like scrolling for a few minutes and losing 2 hours. It looks like feeling mentally exhausted without understanding why. It looks like waking up tired, even after resting. It looks like being constantly stimulated, yet emotionally empty. And somewhere deep down, millions of people feel it. That strange feeling that something is wrong, something unnatural, something missing. But they can't fully explain it. Because the modern world has become incredibly good at distracting people from themselves. Right now, there are people sitting in crowded rooms feeling completely alone. People surrounded by entertainment, yet unable to feel peace. People consuming motivation every day, while quietly falling apart internally. And the terrifying thing is, this didn't happen accidentally. Because attention has become one of the most valuable resources on Earth, and everything around you is competing for it. Every app, every platform, every notification, every headline, every endless scroll. The modern world profits from distracted minds, from overstimulated minds, from emotionally dependent minds, from people too mentally exhausted to think deeply anymore. And maybe that sounds dramatic, until you look honestly at what life has become for millions of people. People cannot sit in silence anymore, cannot focus deeply anymore, cannot stay present anymore, cannot even enjoy rest without reaching for stimulation. That is not normal. That is conditioning. And in this video, you are going to understand why modern people feel mentally exhausted, why attention spans are collapsing, why loneliness is rising, why so many people secretly feel disconnected from life itself, and most importantly, how to reclaim your mind before the modern world completely consumes it. Because once you see these patterns clearly, you will never look at modern life the same way again. This is Persistence Project HQ, where we break down the psychological patterns, invisible systems, and modern habits shaping human behavior, so you can think deeper, live more intentionally, and take back control of your life. If you're serious about rebuilding your focus, discipline, and awareness in a world designed to destroy all three, then stay connected to this journey. Because the people who survive this era mentally will not be the people with the most talent. They will be the people who learn how to protect their mind. Today, we're talking about the modern world is destroying your mind. About Chapter 1, The Death of Silence. There was a time when silence was normal. People walked without headphones, waited without scrolling, sat with their thoughts without immediately escaping them. Silence once existed naturally in human life, and because of that, people remained connected to something modern life is slowly destroying: their inner world. But today, silence has almost disappeared. The moment discomfort appears, people reach for stimulation, music, videos, notifications, scrolling, noise, anything to avoid being alone with their own thoughts. And at first, that seems harmless, but psychologically, something dangerous begins happening when the mind loses its ability to experience stillness, because silence is where self-awareness develops. It is where reflection happens, where emotions surface, where clarity forms, where people confront who they really are beneath distraction. And that confrontation can feel uncomfortable, because silence reveals things people spend most of their lives trying not to notice: unresolved pain, fear, loneliness, regret, emotional exhaustion, the quiet awareness that life is moving faster than they are truly living it. That is why many people unconsciously fear silence now. Not because silence is dangerous, but because awareness is. There's a reason why philosophers throughout history valued solitude so deeply. Blaise Pascal once wrote that many of humanity's problems come from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. And centuries later, that observation feels more accurate than ever. Because modern life has trained people to constantly escape inward reflection. The moment boredom appears, distraction arrives. The moment stillness appears, stimulation replaces it. And over time, people lose their tolerance for their own mind. That's why so many individuals now feel restless during simple moments. Standing in line, sitting quietly, walking without stimulation. Even eating without consuming content feels uncomfortable for many people now. Not because human beings naturally evolved this way, but because attention conditioning has reshaped behavior. And the consequences are deeper than most people realize. Because when people lose connection with silence, they slowly lose connection with themselves. There are people listening to this right now who haven't truly sat alone with their thoughts in years. Not fully, not honestly. Because every quiet moment gets interrupted. Every emotional discomfort gets numbed. Every reflective moment gets replaced by endless stimulation. And eventually, the mind becomes dependent on noise. This is one of the hidden reasons modern people feel mentally exhausted all the time. Their brain never truly rests. Not emotionally, not psychologically, not neurologically, because stimulation never stops. Think about how often the modern brain shifts attention in a single day. Messages, videos, notifications, music, scrolling, advertisements, short-form content, constant emotional input. The human nervous system was never designed for this level of uninterrupted stimulation. And yet, this has become normal life. There's something deeply unnatural about millions of people being unable to experience 5 minutes of silence without discomfort. Because silence once served an important purpose. It allowed human beings to process life, to emotionally recover, to think deeply, to create meaning. But modern distraction interrupts that process continuously, and slowly, people become strangers to themselves. They lose clarity, patience, depth, emotional awareness, attention span, presence. And the dangerous part is, most people blame themselves for the symptoms, without recognizing the environment shaping them. They think, I'm lazy, I can't focus, I'm unmotivated, I'm mentally weak. But often, their mind is simply overwhelmed, overstimulated, fragmented by constant input. And this fragmentation affects everything: relationships, discipline, creativity, emotional regulation, even the ability to feel fulfilled. Because fulfillment requires presence. And presence becomes impossible when attention is constantly scattered. This is why many people now experience life without fully feeling connected to it. They are physically present, but mentally somewhere else. Always consuming, always distracted, always fragmented. And maybe the scariest part is this: most people now mistake constant stimulation for living. But being constantly entertained is not the same as being fulfilled. Being constantly connected is not the same as feeling understood. And being constantly busy is not the same as having meaning. The modern world has become incredibly efficient at giving people stimulation while quietly starving them of depth. And once a person loses depth, they begin drifting through life unconsciously. If this already feels painfully familiar, comment silence, because what we're about to discuss next goes even deeper. Because silence disappearing was only the beginning. What happened next changed the human brain itself. Chapter 2: The Attention War. For most of human history, Attention belonged to the individual. People decided what deserved their focus, what deserved their time, what deserved their mental energy. But today, attention has become an industry, a battlefield, a resource companies compete for aggressively. Because modern corporations understand something most people still underestimate: whoever controls attention eventually influences behavior. And the modern world has become extraordinarily skilled at capturing human focus, not for minutes, but for entire lifetimes. Every notification is engineered to interrupt you. Every platform is designed to pull you back. Every algorithm studies human behavior continuously, learning what keeps people emotionally engaged the longest: fear, outrage, novelty, validation, comparison, dopamine. This is no longer random entertainment. It is psychological engineering, and most people walk into it every single day without realizing how deeply it affects them. Think about how often you reach for your phone automatically, not consciously, automatically. A moment of boredom appears, and the hand moves on its own. That's conditioning, not weakness. Conditioning. The brain learns patterns through repetition, and modern technology exploits that mechanism constantly. There's a reason why many apps use endless scrolling. No stopping point, no completion, no natural ending, because the human brain struggles to disengage from unfinished reward cycles, and the longer attention remains trapped, the more profitable the system becomes. The terrifying part is, people believe they are choosing freely, while much of their behavior is being shaped invisibly. There are individuals who cannot sleep without consuming content, cannot wake up without checking notifications, cannot eat without stimulation, cannot work without switching tabs every few minutes, cannot rest without reaching for entertainment. And slowly, the mind loses its ability to sustain deep focus. That matters more than people realize, because attention is connected to the quality of your entire life. Whatever controls your attention eventually controls your direction, your habits, your emotions, your priorities, your identity. There's a reason why Nikola Tesla was known for intense periods of uninterrupted concentration. Many great thinkers throughout history protected their focus obsessively, because deep work creates depth of thought, and depth of thought creates meaningful contribution. But modern systems reward the opposite: speed, reaction, surface-level engagement, constant consumption. The result? Millions of people consuming information endlessly without deeply processing anything. And this creates a dangerous illusion. People feel mentally busy all day, yet accomplish very little that genuinely moves their life forward, because fragmented attention produces fragmented results. Imagine trying to build a house while someone interrupts you every 30 seconds. Eventually, the structure weakens. That is exactly what constant digital interruption does to the human mind. People attempt to build discipline while drowning in distraction. Attempt to build focus while surrounded by stimulation. Attempt to build clarity while absorbing endless noise. And eventually, mental exhaustion becomes normal. This is why so many people now struggle with concentration, not because they are incapable, but because their brain has adapted to rapid stimulation cycles, short videos, quick dopamine hits, fast emotional shifts, instant novelty. And once the mind adapts to speed, slower, meaningful activities begin feeling difficult. Reading becomes harder. Reflection becomes harder. Long-term goals become harder. Presence becomes harder. This is one of the hidden costs of the modern attention economy. It weakens patience. And without patience, people lose the ability to build deeply. Relationships weaken. Discipline weakens. Creativity weakens. Purpose weakens. Because meaningful things often require sustained attention. A strong relationship requires presence. A meaningful career requires consistency. A transformed life requires long-term focus. But the modern world conditions people for constant interruption instead. And maybe the most dangerous effect of all is emotional fragmentation, because every platform is fighting to trigger emotional reaction quickly. Fear, excitement, anger, comparison, desire, outrage. The nervous system never fully settles. The brain remains overstimulated, and over time, people become emotionally exhausted without understanding why. This is why many individuals feel strangely numb now, not because they feel nothing, but because they feel too much too often. Too many headlines, too many opinions, too many comparisons, too many voices competing inside the mind simultaneously. And eventually, the brain begins protecting itself through emotional dullness. People stop feeling deeply, stop processing deeply, stop connecting deeply. Everything becomes surface-level stimulation. There's a reason why more people now report feeling disconnected from themselves despite being constantly connected digitally. Because connection is not the same as closeness. Information is not the same as wisdom, and stimulation is not the same as fulfillment. The modern world gives people endless access to content, while quietly starving them of meaning. And many people sense this internally, that strange emptiness after hours online, that feeling of mental fatigue after endless scrolling, that inability to fully relax even during rest. Because the mind was never designed to absorb this much stimulation continuously. And if people do not consciously reclaim their attention, they slowly lose ownership over their inner world entirely. That is the real danger. Not technology itself, but unconscious dependency. Because dependency weakens freedom, and many modern habits are designed specifically to create dependency. Dependency on stimulation, dependency on validation, dependency on distraction, dependency on constant emotional input. And once dependency becomes normalized, people stop questioning it. They assume exhaustion is normal, assume distraction is normal, assume mental fragmentation is normal. But it isn't. Human beings were not designed to live in constant psychological noise, and the consequences are becoming impossible to ignore. Rising anxiety, burnout, loneliness, attention collapse, emotional exhaustion. A generation that feels mentally overwhelmed before life has even fully begun. If you've noticed your attention becoming weaker over the years, comment, focus, because what we're about to discuss next may explain why so many people feel emotionally disconnected from life itself. Not distracted, disconnected. Chapter 3. Why nobody feels present anymore. There are people living entire years without fully experiencing their own life. They wake up, move through routines, respond to messages, go to work, consume content, go to sleep, and repeat. Not because they consciously chose this existence, but because modern life slowly pulled them into survival mode, and survival mode changes the way people experience reality. When the nervous system becomes overloaded consistently, presence disappears. The mind stops fully living in the moment. Instead, it begins constantly jumping between stress, stimulation, memory, anticipation, distraction, and emotional noise. That's why many people now struggle to feel genuinely connected to simple experiences. A conversation, a sunset, music, food, relationships, even rest itself. Their body is present, but their attention is fragmented somewhere else, thinking ahead, scrolling mentally, replaying stress, seeking the next stimulation. And eventually, life starts feeling strangely unreal, like time is moving fast, without leaving emotional impact. This is one of the hidden tragedies of modern living. People are consuming more experiences than ever before, while feeling less emotionally connected to them. Vacations become content opportunities. Moments become uploads. Experiences become performances. And slowly, people stop experiencing life directly. They begin experiencing it through observation instead. There's a reason why many people now instinctively reach for their phone during meaningful moments: concerts, dinners, birthdays, travel, even emotional conversations. Because modern conditioning has trained people to document experiences instead of fully living them, and over time, that separation weakens emotional presence. The mind becomes split constantly between what is happening and how should this appear. That internal division creates disconnection, and disconnection slowly turns into numbness. This is why some people feel emotionally empty despite being constantly entertained, because stimulation is not the same as emotional fulfillment. In fact, constant stimulation often prevents emotional processing entirely. The brain never pauses long enough to absorb experience deeply. Everything becomes fast, temporary, replaceable. A new video, a new trend, a new distraction, a new emotional spike, and eventually, the nervous system loses stability. There's a reason why many people now say things like, "I don't feel like myself anymore," because deep down, they sense they've become disconnected from their own inner experience. Modern life rewards speed so aggressively that people rarely pause long enough to ask themselves important questions anymore. What do I actually want? Why am I unhappy? What kind of person am I becoming? What is all this rushing actually leading toward? Instead, people stay busy, distracted, mentally occupied, because busyness creates temporary escape from deeper awareness, and that escape can become addictive. There are people who fear stillness now because stillness forces confrontation. Confrontation with loneliness, dissatisfaction, emotional exhaustion, wasted time, unresolved pain, and unmet potential. So they keep moving constantly, not always physically, mentally. Always consuming something, always checking something, always stimulating the brain. Because silence begins exposing things distraction was hiding. This is one of the reasons anxiety feels so widespread today. The modern nervous system rarely fully settles. It remains hyper-alert, hyper-stimulated, hyper-engaged. And when the nervous system remains overloaded long enough, people begin losing access to emotional clarity. They stop understanding what they genuinely feel. Everything becomes mixed together. Stress, stimulation, pressure, comparison, exhaustion, emotional overload. That confusion creates emotional numbness, not because emotions disappear, but because the mind becomes overwhelmed processing them all simultaneously. There's a reason why many people now feel strangely detached from time itself. Weeks blur together, months disappear quickly, entire years pass without strong emotional memory. Because memory becomes weaker when presence becomes weaker. The human mind remembers what it experiences deeply, but modern distraction prevents depth. Everything moves too quickly. And maybe that's why so many people suddenly wake up feeling lost in adulthood, because they spent years surviving mentally without consciously living. There are people who worked constantly for years, only to realize they never actually felt connected to their own life during that time. People who spent years online, yet still feel profoundly lonely. People surrounded by entertainment, yet emotionally exhausted every night. This is the paradox of the modern world. Human beings have never had more stimulation, while simultaneously feeling less alive internally. And most people keep assuming, if I just find the next thing, the next achievement, the next distraction, the next relationship, the next breakthrough, then the emptiness will disappear. But often, the problem is not absence of stimulation. It is absence of presence. Presence requires slowness, attention, stillness, emotional awareness. And those are precisely the things modern systems quietly erode. There's a reason why ancient philosophies repeatedly emphasized awareness. Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about attention, intentionality, and mental discipline centuries ago, because even then, human beings understood something modern culture keeps forgetting. A distracted mind cannot experience life deeply, and depth is what gives life emotional richness. Without depth, people drift, consume, react, repeat, but never truly feel grounded within themselves. That's why many individuals now feel emotionally fragile, not weak, disconnected. There's a difference. Disconnected people lose emotional stability because their inner world becomes dependent on external stimulation constantly. Validation, entertainment, attention, distraction, noise. And once external stimulation becomes the primary source of emotional regulation, inner peace becomes extremely difficult to maintain, because peace cannot survive inside constant psychological chaos. If any part of this feels painfully familiar, comment "present," because what we're about to uncover next may be the deepest reason modern people feel so emotionally drained all the time. Not because they're doing too much physically, but because their brain is trapped in a cycle it was never designed to handle. Chapter 4. Dopamine and Emotional Exhaustion. Most people think dopamine is happiness. It isn't. Dopamine is anticipation, desire, pursuit, the feeling that something rewarding might happen. And the modern world has learned how to manipulate that system constantly. Every swipe, every notification, every short video, every like, every unpredictable reward. All of it stimulates dopamine pathways inside the brain. That's why people keep checking their phones automatically, not because every interaction matters, but because the brain becomes addicted to anticipation itself. Maybe the next notification will feel rewarding. Maybe the next video will feel exciting. Maybe the next scroll will remove boredom. Maybe the next piece of content will finally satisfy something internally. But it never lasts, because dopamine was never designed to create lasting fulfillment. It was designed to motivate behavior. And when the brain becomes overstimulated continuously, something dangerous begins happening psychologically. Ordinary life starts feeling emotionally flat. Simple pleasures lose intensity. Stillness feels boring. Focus feels difficult. Patience weakens, and the nervous system begins craving stronger and faster stimulation constantly. This is why many people now struggle to enjoy slow activities. Reading a book, having a deep conversation, walking quietly, working on one task for an extended period. Their brain has adapted to rapid dopamine cycles, fast novelty, instant emotional reward, continuous stimulation. And once the nervous system becomes conditioned that way, normal life begins feeling underwhelming. That's one of the hidden reasons modern people feel exhausted all the time. Not because they are physically overworked, but because their brain is neurologically overloaded. Constant dopamine spikes create emotional instability. The nervous system never fully resets. The brain remains trapped between stimulation and depletion repeatedly. And eventually, people begin feeling emotionally drained, even after doing very little physically. That confuses many individuals. They think, "Why am I so tired all the time?" But mental overstimulation creates exhaustion too, especially when the brain rarely experiences true rest anymore. There are people spending entire evenings consuming stimulation, then wondering why they still feel empty afterward. Because stimulation without meaning eventually creates emotional burnout. The mind keeps chasing emotional reward without ever reaching genuine fulfillment. And modern systems are designed to keep that cycle running indefinitely, because emotionally dependent users remain engaged longer. There's a reason why short-form content has become so addictive globally. It delivers rapid dopamine bursts continuously, quick novelty, quick emotional shifts, quick stimulation. The brain never settles into depth. It remains in constant pursuit mode, and over time, that weakens attention span dramatically. This is why many people now struggle to stay engaged with slower, meaningful experiences. Not because meaningful things lost value, but because the nervous system became conditioned for speed. And unfortunately, speed destroys depth. Deep thinking requires patience. Deep relationships require presence. Deep fulfillment requires stillness. But modern dopamine culture trains people to constantly seek more stimulation, more novelty, more excitement, more distraction. And eventually, people lose the ability to simply exist peacefully. That's why silence feels uncomfortable now, why boredom feels unbearable, why stillness creates anxiety. Because boredom was once a doorway into creativity and reflection. Now, people escape boredom instantly before the mind can even settle. There's something deeply important people are losing because of this: mental recovery. The human brain needs periods of low stimulation to regulate itself properly, but modern life rarely allows that anymore. Even rest became stimulation. People relax while scrolling, eat while consuming content, fall asleep with videos playing, wake up into notifications immediately. The nervous system never fully disconnects from input, and over time, this creates chronic emotional fatigue. There are people who haven't experienced genuine mental quiet in years, not because life became impossible, but because stimulation became constant. And the scary part is, many people now interpret this overstimulated state as normal consciousness. They don't even realize how fragmented their mind has become. This is why emotional regulation becomes harder too. When the nervous system remains overloaded, small frustrations feel bigger, patience weakens, impulse control weakens, mood stability weakens. The brain becomes emotionally reactive because it never fully recovers from stimulation cycles. And eventually, people begin living emotionally exhausted lives without understanding the real cause. There's a reason why many modern individuals constantly feel restless, mentally foggy, emotionally numb, distracted, unmotivated, and disconnected simultaneously. Their nervous system is overwhelmed, not weak, overwhelmed. And perhaps the most dangerous consequence of dopamine overload is that people lose sensitivity to ordinary life itself. Small joys stop feeling powerful. Simple moments stop feeling meaningful. Human connection weakens emotionally. Presence weakens psychologically. Because the brain becomes conditioned to seek intensity constantly, and real life rarely operates at the speed of digital stimulation. That mismatch creates dissatisfaction, a quiet feeling that normal life is not enough. And many people spend years chasing stronger stimulation, trying to escape that emptiness. More content, more entertainment, more scrolling, more consumption. But the emptiness remains, because the nervous system isn't starving for stimulation anymore. It's starving for recovery. There's a reason why people often feel strangely calm after disconnecting from technology for long periods. Nature, silence, deep conversation, stillness. Because the nervous system finally has space to breathe again, to regulate, to settle, to reconnect with reality outside endless stimulation cycles. And maybe that's why modern people secretly crave escape so deeply now, not because they hate life, but because their mind is exhausted. Exhausted from constant comparison, constant input, constant pressure, constant stimulation, constant emotional noise. And if that exhaustion continues long enough, people begin losing connection not only with focus, but with each other, because emotional exhaustion changes relationships too. And what we're about to discuss next might explain why loneliness is rising even in the most connected era in human history. Chapter 5: The Loneliness Epidemic. Human beings have never been more connected digitally. And yet, so many people have never felt more alone emotionally. That contradiction should disturb people more than it does. Because loneliness was once associated with physical isolation, now people can spend all day communicating online and still feel deeply disconnected internally. Why? Because connection and closeness are not the same thing. Modern interaction has become fast, fragmented, performative, constant, but rarely deep. People exchange messages all day without feeling emotionally understood. They consume each other's lives through screens without truly knowing each other anymore. And slowly, relationships begin losing depth, not all at once, quietly. Conversations become shorter, attention becomes divided, presence disappears, and emotional intimacy weakens. There are people sitting together physically right now, while both individuals are mentally somewhere else entirely, scrolling, checking notifications, half listening, half present. And over time, that fractured attention changes relationships profoundly, because meaningful connection requires something modern life keeps destroying: presence. To feel understood, people need attention, not partial attention, not distracted attention, real attention. But attention has become one of the rarest things in modern life. Everyone is stimulated, busy, mentally fragmented, emotionally overwhelmed. And because of that, many relationships now exist at surface level. People communicate constantly, while rarely discussing what truly matters internally: fear, purpose, pain, identity, loneliness, emotional exhaustion. There's a reason why so many individuals secretly feel unseen now, because visibility is not the same as understanding. A person can have thousands of followers and still feel emotionally alone, because human beings were never designed to survive only on attention. They need emotional connection, safety, depth, belonging. And modern culture often replaces those deeper needs with performance instead. People begin managing perception more than reality, curating identity instead of expressing authenticity. That creates emotional separation, because the more performative someone becomes, the harder genuine connection feels. There are individuals who spend years trying to appear happy online, while quietly struggling internally in silence. Not because they are dishonest, but because modern culture rewards image more than vulnerability. And eventually, people stop feeling safe showing who they truly are. This creates a generation that is hyper-visible digitally, but emotionally guarded internally. And emotional guardedness increases loneliness dramatically, because real closeness requires emotional exposure, the willingness to be seen honestly. But many people now fear vulnerability deeply, fear rejection, fear judgment, fear appearing imperfect. So instead, they stay emotionally hidden. Even inside relationships, even around friends, even around family. That's one of the hidden reasons loneliness feels so widespread now. Not simply because people lack interaction, but because they lack emotional safety. And emotional safety becomes harder in environments built around comparison and performance constantly. There's also another painful reality modern people rarely discuss. Many individuals no longer know how to be fully present with each other anymore. Attention spans weakened, patience weakened, listening weakened, silence became uncomfortable. And without deep listening, relationships slowly become transactional, functional, shallow. People talk without feeling heard, share without feeling understood, exist near each other without truly connecting emotionally. This is why some individuals feel lonelier after social interaction than before it, because superficial interaction can intensify emotional emptiness when deeper connection is absent. And the modern world unintentionally reinforces this cycle constantly. Shorter communication, faster interaction, less patience, more distraction, less depth. There's a reason why older forms of human connection often felt emotionally richer. People spent uninterrupted time together, long conversations, shared silence, presence without constant digital interruption. Today, many conversations compete against devices for attention, and eventually, relationships begin feeling emotionally diluted. This emotional dilution affects mental health more than people realize, because human beings regulate emotions through connection, through being understood, through feeling emotionally safe with others. And when those needs remain unmet long enough, people begin experiencing emotional emptiness internally. Not dramatic emptiness, quiet emptiness. The kind that appears late at night. The kind people try to silence with entertainment. The kind hidden beneath constant busyness. There are people who have mastered appearing socially connected while internally feeling completely alone. And maybe the saddest part is this. Many people no longer even expect deep connection anymore. They've adapted to emotional distance as normal life. They tell themselves, this is just adulthood. This is just modern life. This is how people are now. But human beings were not designed for chronic emotional disconnection. That's why loneliness affects physical health, mental health, and emotional stability so deeply. The nervous system interprets prolonged emotional isolation as danger. And eventually, that emotional deprivation creates exhaustion, anxiety, depression, hopelessness, even identity confusion. Because people discover who they are partly through meaningful connection with others. Without depth, the inner world weakens. This is why genuine human presence feels so powerful now. A real conversation, someone truly listening, someone emotionally available, someone fully present without distraction. Those moments feel rare because they are rare. And maybe that's why so many people secretly crave authenticity now. Not more content, not more stimulation, not more performance, realness. Something emotionally honest in a world becoming increasingly artificial. If any part of this resonates deeply, comment human, because what we're about to uncover next may be the root of why modern people feel so emotionally lost in the first place. Not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack potential, but because modern systems slowly disconnected them from themselves. Chapter 6: The Loss of Identity. One of the greatest psychological crises of the modern world is that many people no longer know who they are outside stimulation, performance, and survival. They know what they consume. They know what entertains them. They know how to appear functional, but internally, their sense of identity feels unstable. And identity instability changes everything. Because when people lose connection with themselves, they become highly vulnerable to outside influence. Trends begin shaping personality. Algorithms begin shaping belief systems. Social validation begins shaping self-worth. And eventually, people stop asking, "What do I genuinely believe?" They start asking, "What will be accepted?" That shift is dangerous because human beings slowly become performers inside their own life. Adjusting constantly, filtering constantly, comparing constantly, seeking approval constantly. There are people who haven't made a truly independent decision in years, not because they lack intelligence, but because external noise became louder than internal clarity. And when that happens, identity begins fragmenting. This is one of the hidden psychological consequences of constant comparison. The mind loses stable self-perception. People start measuring themselves against thousands of curated lives continuously. Appearance, success, lifestyle, relationships, money, achievement. And over time, comparison quietly erodes self-worth. Because comparison creates an endless moving target. No matter what someone achieves, there will always appear to be someone doing more, looking better, living better, winning faster. And the human nervous system was never designed to absorb this level of social comparison constantly. There's a reason why many people now feel chronically inadequate despite objectively improving their lives. Because digital culture magnifies perceived insufficiency continuously, people stop appreciating progress because they remain emotionally focused on what they still lack. And eventually, identity becomes externally dependent. Self-worth depends on response, validation, recognition, attention, approval. That creates emotional instability. Because external validation is unpredictable, temporary, fragile. There are individuals who feel confident one day and worthless the next, simply because external feedback shifted slightly. That's not confidence. That's emotional dependency disguised as confidence. Real identity stability comes from internal alignment, knowing who you are, independent of applause, independent of trends, independent of comparison. But modern culture rarely encourages that kind of internal grounding anymore. Instead, people are encouraged to constantly optimize perception, build image, maintain relevance, stay visible. And while there's nothing inherently wrong with visibility, constant performance eventually disconnects people from authenticity. Because performance requires control, authenticity requires honesty. And honesty can feel terrifying in environments built around judgment. So people adapt. They become versions of themselves designed for acceptance. A version for social media, a version for work, a version for relationships, a version for public perception. And after enough repetition, many individuals quietly lose track of which version actually feels real anymore. That confusion creates deep emotional fatigue because pretending requires energy. Constant self-monitoring requires energy. Constant comparison requires energy. Eventually, people become exhausted, not from physical labor, but from psychological fragmentation. This is why authenticity feels increasingly rare and powerful now, because genuine self-expression has become emotionally risky in highly performative environments. There's a reason why deeply authentic individuals often stand out immediately. People sense honesty instinctively. They sense emotional congruence. And in a world filled with performance, truth feels magnetic. But reaching authenticity requires something many people avoid: self-confrontation. The willingness to sit quietly and ask difficult questions. What do I actually value? What am I pretending not to know? What patterns am I repeating? What kind of life am I unconsciously building? Who am I becoming through my habits? Most people avoid these questions because they disrupt comfort, and disruption creates uncertainty. But avoiding self-awareness creates a far greater danger: living unconsciously for years. There are people who wake up decades later realizing they built an entire life around external expectation without ever deeply understanding themselves. That realization can feel devastating because time is irreversible. This is why awareness matters so much. Not motivational awareness, honest awareness. The kind that forces people to recognize where they are emotionally, what patterns control them, what environments weaken them, and what version of themselves they are reinforcing daily. Awareness interrupts unconscious living, and unconscious living is what traps most people psychologically. Not because they are incapable of growth, but because they never fully examined the systems shaping them. There's a reason why philosophers throughout history emphasized self-knowledge repeatedly. Socrates famously associated wisdom with knowing one's self, because without self-awareness, People become easily manipulated by fear, distraction, comparison, and external pressure. And modern systems thrive on unconscious behavior. The less aware people are, the easier they are to influence. But awareness changes something fundamental psychologically. Once people begin seeing patterns clearly, they stop operating purely on autopilot. They begin noticing how distraction affects them, how comparison weakens them, how environments shape behavior, how repeated habits slowly create identity. And slowly, they reclaim ownership over their inner world again. Not perfectly, not instantly, but intentionally. That is where transformation truly begins. Not with motivation, not with inspiration, with awareness. Because awareness creates choice, and choice creates change. If you're still listening this far, then part of you already recognizes something important. You cannot heal a life you refuse to examine. And what we're about to discuss next may be the most important realization in this entire video. Because awareness alone is not enough. Eventually, something has to change. Chapter 7. Rebuilding your mind. Real change does not begin with motivation. Motivation is temporary. Emotion is temporary. Inspiration is temporary. That's why so many people feel powerful one night and lost again the next morning. Because emotion alone cannot sustain transformation. Real change begins when a person decides to rebuild the systems shaping their mind daily. Not perfectly, consistently. That distinction matters more than most people realize. Because people often destroy progress by expecting instant transformation. They try changing everything at once. A new routine, a new mindset, a new identity, a completely different life overnight. And when they inevitably struggle, they interpret difficulty as failure. But struggle is not failure. Struggle is adaptation. Every meaningful transformation feels uncomfortable in the beginning because the brain resists unfamiliar patterns naturally. There's a reason why people returning to old habits often describe it as automatic. Because repetition creates neurological efficiency. The brain conserves energy through patterns. That means every repeated behavior strengthens specific neural pathways over time. Discipline can become automatic. Distraction can become automatic. Negativity can become automatic. Confidence can become automatic. Self-destruction can become automatic. Whatever a person repeats consistently, the brain gradually normalizes. That realization is both terrifying and powerful, because it means your daily habits are not just shaping behavior. They are shaping identity. Every repeated action teaches the brain something about who you are. When someone consistently avoids discomfort, the brain learns, I am someone who retreats. When someone consistently follows through despite resistance, the brain learns, I am someone who persists. Identity is reinforced through repetition. That's why rebuilding your mind requires rebuilding patterns first. Small patterns, daily patterns, invisible patterns. The way you speak to yourself, the way you respond to discomfort, the way you use your attention, the way you handle boredom, the way you recover from failure. People underestimate how much these small behaviors compound over time. One distracted day feels harmless. One procrastinated decision feels harmless. 1 hour wasted feels harmless. But repeated daily over years, small behaviors become entire lifestyles, entire identities, entire futures. This is why awareness alone changes nothing unless behavior changes with it. A person can recognize every destructive pattern in their life and still remain trapped inside them. Because insight without action becomes another form of illusion. And many intelligent people fall into this trap. They understand psychology deeply, understand discipline deeply, understand growth deeply, but never consistently apply what they know. Knowledge feels productive. Application creates transformation. There's a reason why David Goggins became known for mental discipline rather than motivation. Because discipline continues functioning after emotion disappears. Anyone can act when inspired. Transformation belongs to people who continue after inspiration fades. That's the difficult phase nobody romanticizes. The repetitive phase. The invisible phase. The phase where effort produces no immediate visible reward. Most people quit there, not because they lack potential, but because modern culture conditioned them to expect fast results. Fast growth, fast success, fast transformation. But meaningful psychological rebuilding operates differently. It is gradual, quiet, often invisible at first. A person rebuilding discipline may still feel inconsistent emotionally for a while. A person rebuilding confidence may still feel insecure sometimes. A person rebuilding focus may still struggle with distraction initially. That does not mean growth is absent. It means rewiring takes time. And this is where patience becomes essential psychologically, because impatience destroys consistency. People abandon systems too early because they mistake slow progress for failure. But slow progress compounds. One intentional decision repeated daily becomes identity eventually. One disciplined habit repeated consistently reshapes behavior gradually. One shift in thinking repeated long enough changes emotional patterns entirely. The human mind adapts to what it practices repeatedly. That is both the danger and the opportunity. If someone practices distraction daily, focus weakens. If someone practices negativity daily, hope weakens. If someone practices avoidance daily, courage weakens. But the reverse is also true. Practiced discipline strengthens discipline. Practiced awareness strengthens awareness. Practiced focus strengthens focus. Practiced resilience strengthens resilience. This is why rebuilding your life often begins with rebuilding your relationship with small decisions, not dramatic moments, ordinary moments. The decision to stay present, the decision to follow through, the decision to stop escaping discomfort instantly, the decision to protect attention intentionally, the decision to become conscious of repeated patterns. These moments appear small individually, but over time, they redefine identity. There's also something many people misunderstand about healing and growth. Progress is rarely linear. There will still be setbacks, still be difficult days, still be moments where old habits return. That does not erase progress, because transformation is not perfection, it is direction. And direction matters enormously. A person moving slowly toward growth is still moving. Modern culture often glorifies dramatic breakthroughs, but most lives are changed quietly, day by day, habit by habit, decision by decision. That's how identities evolve, not through one emotional night, through repeated conscious action over time. And eventually, something remarkable happens psychologically. The things that once felt difficult become normal. Focus becomes easier. Discipline becomes easier. Presence becomes easier. Self-respect becomes stronger. Not because life became perfect, but because the mind adapted to a healthier pattern. This is why protecting your environment matters too, because environments reinforce identity continuously. The content you consume affects thought patterns. The people around you affect standards. The routines surrounding you affect behavior. Nobody evolves in isolation from environment completely, which means growth sometimes requires difficult separation. Separation from destructive habits, toxic environments, endless distraction, unhealthy comparison, and routines keeping you mentally stagnant. That process can feel lonely initially, because growth changes perspective. People begin valuing different things, protecting their attention differently, using time differently, thinking differently. And sometimes, others around them may not understand that shift immediately. But transformation always changes identity before the external world fully notices. If you've made it this far, then something inside you probably recognizes that your life cannot continue on autopilot forever. Because eventually, unconscious patterns become consequences. And what we're about to discuss next is the final realization most people avoid until it's almost too late. Final chapter: the cost of wasted years. There is something deeply painful about realizing you were alive, but not fully living. Not because you lacked potential, not because you lacked intelligence, but because unconscious patterns quietly consumed years of your life. And the frightening part is, most people do not notice it while it's happening. Days feel normal, weeks feel normal, even years can feel normal. Until one day, something shifts. Maybe it happens late at night, maybe during silence, maybe after failure, maybe after burnout, maybe after watching life move forward while you internally feel stuck. And suddenly, you realize time has been moving faster than your awareness. That realization can shake people deeply, because time is the one thing human beings can never recover. Money can return, opportunities can return, energy can return, but wasted years never return exactly the same way again. That truth becomes heavier with age. There are people who spent decades distracted, decades performing, decades surviving emotionally, decades repeating cycles they never examined. And eventually, they begin mourning versions of themselves they never became. The writer they never started becoming. The disciplined version of themselves they kept postponing. The peaceful version of themselves hidden beneath distraction. The emotionally honest version buried under fear and performance. This grief is rarely discussed openly, but many adults carry it quietly. The grief of unrealized potential. Not because life defeated them completely, but because unconscious living slowly disconnected them from their own direction. There's a reason why many people become emotional when they finally slow down long enough to reflect honestly. Because awareness exposes accumulation. Accumulated habits. Accumulated avoidance. Accumulated wasted time. Accumulated emotional neglect. And once people see the pattern clearly, they cannot unsee it anymore. That moment can feel terrifying, but it can also become the beginning of transformation. Because awareness creates a choice: continue drifting unconsciously, or rebuild intentionally. Most people wait too long to make that decision. They assume there will always be more time, more energy, more opportunity. But life changes quickly. Health changes. Relationships change. Circumstances change. People change. And one of the most dangerous illusions human beings believe is the idea that they can postpone becoming who they need to become indefinitely. Eventually, delay becomes identity. A person postpones growth for so long that procrastination itself becomes part of who they are psychologically. That's why change becomes harder later, not impossible, heavier. Because repeated avoidance strengthens emotional resistance. This is why small conscious action matters now, not someday, now. Not because you must become perfect immediately, but because direction compounds over time. Every year spent living intentionally strengthens identity. Every year spent unconscious strengthens stagnation. And whether people realize it or not, they are always building a future version of themselves through repetition. The person you become 5 years from now is being shaped by what you normalize today. The habits you repeat, the thoughts you reinforce, the distractions you tolerate, the excuses you protect, the standards you accept. Everything compounds. That is both the frightening truth and the hopeful one. because it means change remains possible as long as awareness remains alive. Human beings are remarkably adaptable psychologically. People can rebuild discipline, rebuild focus, rebuild emotional stability, rebuild confidence, rebuild identity. But only when they stop escaping reality long enough to confront it honestly. That confrontation is uncomfortable. There is no way around that. Awareness often hurts before it heals, because clarity exposes what distraction was hiding. But avoidance creates a deeper pain eventually, the pain of realizing life moved forward while you remained mentally asleep. And maybe that's what brought you here. Not entertainment, recognition. Maybe part of you already sensed something internally, that your habits were affecting you more deeply than you admitted, that your attention had become fragmented, that your mind felt exhausted, that your life was drifting without clear direction. And maybe, for the first time in a long time, you stopped long enough to listen honestly. If that's true, then remember this carefully. Awareness is not punishment. It is opportunity. The opportunity to interrupt unconscious patterns before they become permanent consequences. The opportunity to reclaim attention before distraction consumes more years. The opportunity to rebuild discipline before regret becomes overwhelming. The opportunity to reconnect with yourself before emotional numbness deepens further. And no, none of this changes overnight. There will still be difficult mornings, still be moments of doubt, still be moments where old habits pull at you again. But awareness changes one critical thing. You stop being controlled unconsciously. You begin seeing the pattern while it's happening, and that awareness creates choice. A choice to respond differently, a choice to protect your mind differently, a choice to stop reinforcing destructive cycles. That is how freedom begins psychologically, not through perfection, through consciousness. And perhaps the most powerful realization of all is understanding that your future is not built in one dramatic moment. It is built quietly, daily, through repeated decisions nobody sees. The moments where you choose growth instead of escape, presence instead of distraction, discipline instead of avoidance, truth instead of performance. Those moments appear small, but they create identity, and identity creates destiny. If you made it all the way to this point, then this message was probably bigger than simple motivation for you. Something inside you connected to it deeply, maybe because you recognized your own patterns, maybe because you're tired of feeling mentally trapped, or maybe because part of you already knows you are capable of more than the life you've been repeating. And if that part of you is still alive, protect it. Because the modern world is filled with systems designed to pull people back into unconscious living, back into distraction, back into emotional numbness, back into endless consumption without direction. But awareness changes people. Real awareness changes lives. And that is what this channel exists for. This is Persistence Project HQ, a place for people trying to think deeper, live more intentionally, rebuild discipline, reclaim focus, and become stronger mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So if this message resonated with you, stay connected to this journey. Subscribe, not because of hype, not because of impulse, but because growth requires reminders. Reminders to stay conscious in a distracted world. Reminders to protect your attention. Reminders to keep rebuilding yourself even when progress feels invisible. And if someone came to your mind while listening to this, share this with them, because sometimes one honest realization is enough to completely change the direction of a person's life. Maybe this video was that moment for you, or maybe it was the beginning of one.